We are covering all of today's events. Terry Parker is live on Southern Boulevard, where supporters of the former president have gathered all afternoon.
Steve King is outside of Mar-a-Lago with the latest on the Trump investigation. We begin with our co-anchor, Todd McDermott, who is leading our team coverage today. Todd?
Felicia, Tiffany, again, the Trump aircraft, the private aircraft, that Boeing 757, touching down at LaGuardia about 3:30 this afternoon. The former president now heading to his Trump Tower residence. Again, he plans to surrender to prosecutors tomorrow. He's indicated he'll do so in the morning in Lower Manhattan. Last week, a grand jury, as you mentioned, did indict the former president on a series of charges, somewhere between 24 and 36, stemming from hush money payments made to adult film actress Stormy Daniels regarding an affair she says she had with Trump a decade before that. These payments were made right before the 2016 presidential election. That said, we don't know exactly what the charges entail. It's been said they have to do with business records and accounting for the payments made to Stormy Daniels. But at this time tomorrow, we will know exactly what those charges are when the indictment is unsealed in court. President Trump's plane landed at LaGuardia, as I said, about 9 minutes ago. He then traveled to Trump Tower, where he's expected to stay for the entire night. Tomorrow, the former president travels to Lower Manhattan with a motorcade, with Secret Service, to be booked, arrested and booked formally in this case. We're told he will not be handcuffed as a former president while he's being booked and processed. He will be fingerprinted, of course. We do expect a mugshot will be taken. Unclear if we'll ever actually see that photo or not. There'll be no other court proceedings going on the 15th floor of that courthouse when he is arraigned before Judge Juan Marchand. His attorney says he, of course, will plead not guilty.
This is unprecedented. We have Secret Service involved. I understand they're closing the courthouse for the afternoon. I just don't know what to expect to see.
Former President Trump has made numerous verbal attacks against the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, and more recently against Judge Juan Marchand, who's presiding over this criminal case. Marchand is an acting state Supreme Court justice. He claims Marchand, quote, hates him. Those comments prompted a warning from the former Manhattan DA who started the hush money investigation years ago.
If I were his lawyer, I would be mindful of not committing some other criminal offense like obstruction of governmental administration, which is interfering with or by threat or otherwise the operation of government.
And to be clear, perhaps right after that arraignment, the former president will head back to LaGuardia and back onto his aircraft to arrive here sometime in the afternoon. He does have an appearance scheduled at a rally, making a speech and address scheduled for 8 p.m. at Mar-a-Lago, not unlike when he announced he was running for president again back in November. Legal experts do say the former president does have hurdles in his way. There are pitfalls he needs to be careful about as this criminal case moves forward. You heard some of that already, but for now, let's go to Steve King, who joins me on what legal obstacles the former president and his lawyers could face going forward in this case. Steve?
Todd, well, you just mentioned some of the statements former President Trump has made about this criminal case. Now, I spoke with Palm Beach County State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg. He says that as of now, nothing that Mr. Trump has said about the criminal case could have any results of penalties, but that could change depending on what Trump says moving forward. Now, I'm right here on Bingham Island near Mar-a-Lago right now along Southern Boulevard. And today we saw former President Trump's motorcade go past us on Southern Boulevard this afternoon. We also saw his plane fly overhead shortly after as armed guards patrolled Mar-a-Lago and supporters made their voices heard here near the resort. Now, as for Ehrenberg, he says if Trump makes an inflammatory statement about the case, the judge could decide a gag order is needed to preserve a fair trial or to protect the court or prosecutor. Ehrenberg says Trump could also be held in contempt of court, depending on what he says, and be jailed up to 30 days. Ehrenberg thinks tomorrow during the arraignment, the judge will warn Mr. Trump to be careful about what he says from this point on.
I don't think he's crossed the line into such inflammatory talk that it would get him criminally charged for it. I don't think he also will get a gag order yet, but I think that he's getting close to that line.
Now, as for here on Palm Beach, we saw plenty of supporters today. They were making their voices heard, waving flags, some cars honking, showing their support for the supporters. as Trump's motorcade was going by and as the plane was flying overhead as well. Some say that they think that everything that's going on is a travesty. They say that they feel bad for Trump and his family right now. And Todd, just like you said, Trump is expected to be back here tomorrow after the arraignment, making public comments from Mar-a-Lago sometime around 8 tomorrow evening. Todd.
All right, we expect the former president to be on a plane at 24 hours from now. Steve King, thank you. Let's talk more about those supporters who turned out to show that they back the former president and don't really care or believe in the charges against him. Terry Parker has been out with them along Southern Boulevard throughout the morning and afternoon. Terry?
This is the place, Todd, where the supporters always gather as that former presidential motorcade goes by. Plenty of enthusiasm here as they watch Mr. Trump's limo go by this morning. And his supporters tell me that they believe that Trump is being unfairly prosecuted and they are firmly behind him. Several hundred of those supporters, people lined the sidewalks for hours before the scheduled motorcade driveway. Some coming from out of state and all over Florida, here to show their support, just as his base has all through his campaign and time as president. Now the former president is facing an unprecedented legal challenge on his way to New York to be arraigned on 24 unspecified criminal charges. Some of his base predicts that this move, while very serious, has put Mr. Trump in the spotlight as he seeks the 2024 presidency and will actually end up helping him.
Keep in mind the independents. That is what I'm focused on for the past 3 weeks. And you're looking at about 70% of the independents right now, let's say, and this is unfair. We're going to go with Trump. We're going to support Trump because of what's going on. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, this is unfair.
This historic moment has galvanized Trump supporters more than ever before. His campaign announcing Friday it received $4 million in donations in the first 24 hours after the indictment was made public. That figure now reportedly up to $7 million. Many of those first-time donors. The campaign saying this shattered the previous donation record made when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago. Again, a historic, never-before moment in the history of American presidency. And of course, it remains to be seen whether this indictment and possible resulting prosecution will actually help Mr. Trump, and his motorcade will once again be passing right by here on Southern Boulevard back home to Mar-a-Lago tomorrow night, where that news conference rally is expected to take place. Back to you, Todd.
Terry Parker. Terry, thank you for that. We also know there's a big change on the Trump legal team. We've been seeing a lot of sound bites interviews with Joe Tacopina. He apparently has been sidelined as a lead attorney. Instead, Todd Blanche, a former federal prosecutor who represented former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort, has taken over the case and will be with Trump in court and on the way to court tomorrow. It is a big change for the Trump legal team. For more on what we expect to happen down at the Lower Manhattan Courthouse tomorrow over the next 24 hours, I'm going to go to Sharman Sacchetti from our sister station in Boston for a look at what's happening there as we speak. Sharman?
Well, Todd, we've been talking about it all day. Just within the last couple of hours, the former president landing here in New York, and now the city really bracing for something that it has never seen before, and that is a former president who has to walk into court and answer to criminal charges. So the former president landed in New York just a short time ago. At Manhattan Criminal Court, there is a heavy police presence. The city says it is ready for the unprecedented arraignment of former President Trump. Outside the court, there are plenty of barriers in place, a massive media presence, and a lot of security. Supporters of the former president, they are planning to rally here Tuesday morning. The mayor of New York says streets in this area around the courthouse and Trump Tower, they are going to be closed. Police are working closely, they say, with Secret Service. They say they don't have safety concerns. They believe they have enough officers out there, and they're asking people to be peaceful and orderly. Back to you, Todd.
Sharman Sacchetti. Sharman, thank you for that. And again, we should point out, more than likely, the former president will not be making an entrance through the main doors of the courthouse. He will either be at the rear of the courthouse, there'll be a tent set up, or he may even enter through a private entrance that there is no way for anyone to see from the outside. We're going to continue with this late breaking news, of course, about the former president's arrival in New York ahead of his appearance in Manhattan to face those criminal charges. Coming up at 5:30, I'm going to speak with our exclusive WPBF 25 News political analysts about the political impact of this indictment and the appearance in state court of the former president tomorrow. And make sure you follow us online at WPBF.com, as well as on our mobile app. We'll send you push notifications with the latest information and breaking updates on what takes place tomorrow, from his arrival at the courthouse to the arraignment itself, the charges and counts against him, and his return to Palm Beach and Mar-a-Lago for the rally tomorrow evening, and public remarks as well.